welcome to part 2 of the interview with Victoria Felkar on the next episode of Bodies, Barbells and Bagels. In this episode, we discuss PED usage with females, whether it's black market, and also not just PEDs, but corticosteroids and other medications, and how it affects you. So, enjoy the episode.
I'm going to let us get onto the PED side of things and let you. Well, it's going to roll on anyway, but Sean's definitely more knowledge about this. I would love to learn more about it, but to be honest, all the clients I've ever worked with have always been natural athletes, so it hasn't really but I'm seeing it become more prevalent in particular bikini divisions in the IFBB and PED, and also the WBFF. So, and I want to more bring awareness to the use of it, because a lot of my clients, because they are all natural athletes, are sometimes a little bit ignorant with it, and they do ask questions, which is great. I like them asking questions, but I want them to hear it from somebody who really can talk about the side effects and the repercussions. So I'm going to let you take it away, Shane.
I think kind of rolling on from here, and if you look at like, for guys example, if we take exogenous testosterone, there is potentially some form of HPT, HPG castration of that act. Is it the same thing when a female takes some form of exogenous I mean, they're all, well, a lot of them are a form or derivative of testosterone. So is it going to be maybe an HPO castration?
Absolutely. And so I call birth control or any type of hormonal contraceptive, hormonal castration by chemical, right? It's a castration. It's chemical castration that is happening. Chemical castration by hormonal manipulation. That is the same thing that can happen from androgen use. Now, it is going to be different for different women, because there's also going to be other influencing agents. So if somebody is on enough of a compound that will cause a chemical castration effect, that could be different for me than for Alice. Like, our bodies are going to have different environments, so we're going to have different thresholds. Now, it is, though, important to understand that prolonged use of any type of steroid, whether that is a contraceptive, an androgenic, or like a steroid, anabolic steroid, a corticosteroid like prednisone, or a mineral corticoid like aldosterone or spironolactone, that will cause a degree of chemical castration. But there are ways that we can work with these things. Like I said, you still might be castrated, but you might not have some of the other effects that come with that prolonged castration, if you can manipulate and manage the effect that drug is having on your body. That's really where my research got about, let's say, a year ago, 2-3 years ago now, when I think about it. Time has been flying, but it's trying to figure out how we can manage the environment more effectively, but also in a way that really within the PED world isn't talked about a lot. All too often with anabolic androgenic steroids, you've got male users that are utilizing certain drugs for certain effects, whether it's hardness or gain or whatever. And then there's this repertoire of other drugs that they take to be able to manage and control for certain, say, side effects like gynecomastia or hair loss or things like that. And so with women, it doesn't mean that because we know we don't have balls, we don't have to do certain things. We do have to do certain things. No matter what type of steroid we're on. And so I really think that, one, we can reframe our language too. Steroids mean whether we're talking about anabolic androgenic steroids or we're talking about hormonal contraceptives, in particular, let's just say the pill, birth control pill. There are certain similarities, both with the effects that are going to happen to our body and also the side effects. And again, they're not really side effects because we know they're going to come with that use of the drug. And these are things that we can also look at in relation to certain types of disorders where a female doesn't have normal HPO, hypothalamus pituitary ovarian drive, or HPA drive. Something like, let's say, hyperandrogenism. I did research on this a couple of years ago that was really, really interesting, because I actually started to look at the quote side effects that people would talk about with female androgen use, and I cross-referenced it with those with women that have hyperandrogenism or just high levels of androgens naturally or due to other factors. And they are very similar. They are so similar. And then if I look at those and I go one step further and I look at them and I compare them with what's happening with oral contraceptive users, they are also very, very similar. And so if we can look at that more bigger picture, I think that also might help the average individual to realize that being on something like birth control is still a steroid. There are still negative effects of that. And being on an androgen is a steroid. There are negative effects of that. And just because you're not feeling it today doesn't mean you're not going to be feeling it later on in your life. Some individuals think that they can get away or around these things because they're not getting virilization or hair growth. You don't know what you're in for. None of us do. We don't have research on this to be able to say, like, without a definitive doubt. And in today's world, you are taking a black market drug, so you have no fucking clue what you're taking. Black market drugs are terrifying. And so if you don't know what you're taking, how the heck do you know what it's going to do to your body? You don't.
Well, here in Australia, for example, just to preface, this is all illegal, which it is in the States as well, but there's quite a common thing that Anavar is more often than not debol.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So if you're a girl trying to take Anavar and all of a sudden you take debol, that's two very, very different drugs.
And it's the typical bikini stack is like Anavar, you know, T3 clen, and you don't know whether you should be on T3, T4. Like, no one has any clue about
depends what forum you're reading.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just so all over the place. Yes, it's just, you don't know what the fuck you're getting, which is the scariest thing, unless you're getting something prescribed from a doctor. And actually interesting, when I competed back to back for a fair few years, quite a high level, and was trying to get my pro card and all of that. And then after competing, I was actually off the pill competing. But I'd been on the pill for about 6 years prior. So I came off to compete thinking it will help me lower body fat, thinking about my hormones. And then after competing and deciding to have a break after 2 years back to back, literally back to back, no breaks, no nothing, I didn't have a cycle and started thinking about my future. And I waited about a year, didn't have a cycle, no bleeding, no nothing, started having the weight gain, started having all of that, went to a doctor who now has lost his medical license, probably why. He put me straight on this stack that he put a whole bunch of girls on in our local area that I thought, because it's a doctor, this is something that's completely normal. This is going to keep me as a natural athlete. And ethically, I probably can't even compete in a natural fed anymore, even though I didn't know. But he put me on DHEA, a really high dose. He put me on, what was it called? It was Thyra. It was like a blend of T3, T4, like thyroxine or something like that. And then he also put me on, what else? There was a few other things there, progesterone. But like a stack of stuff, just literally because I didn't have my period. And that made me gain more weight because, again, my androgens were so messed up. I didn't need testosterone, So it's crazy how bad some of this shit is, that you go to a doctor and that's what they give you, a medical professional. And me and three of my girlfriends who are all in that same kind of cycle of competing, who are like completely different symptoms, all got put on the same thing. And it was like, what is wrong with this world?
And that is so common because, and like I said at the beginning, I don't like to shake my finger at normal GPs and be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, because it is a part of a bigger problem. Our understanding about women and steroid use, whether this is contraceptives or androgens, is so little. Now when we put that in the athletic population, it's even smaller. Like, this is why I've devoted like my career to this, because I saw such a need for it. If we think about, like, I even at the beginning I said, like, the language we use to talk about sex hormones is just wrong. So if we're not even calling these things the right terms, how are we understanding how, like, and what they're doing in our bodies? And then how are we prescribing these things? All too often, androgens get the finger pointed at them. They get the ones that are all the blame. They're villainized, they're demonized, they're criminalized. But some people do need some form of androgen replacement. And some people do need some form of estrogen replacement or progesterone replacement. Now, unfortunately, because we've labeled hormones as sex hormones, and this is something that happened, I mean, even before we even knew what sex hormones were, so it was like 1800s, 1900s, or early 1900s, I should say, we still thought that women had one set of them and men had one set of them. We didn't realize that men and women share the same hormones. We just have different forms of where they're produced and at what levels. Yeah. And the levels are different within those groups as well. Yeah. Some men have high levels of estrogen and that works for their body. Some women have high levels of androgens and that works for them and their bodies. But there are so many other intricacies within this. But the problem here in terms of how we've defined them and thought about them, it's changed how we prescribe them. And it's also changed how we have perceived them. Testosterone has been directly related to something like performance and muscle building, whereas estrogen and progesterone has been assigned to women. It is the female sex hormones. We fail to realize that men have them too, and we fail to realize the profound effect that they have on our performance. Estrogen, progesterone are vital for body fat levels. They are vital for strength. They are vital for vitality. But just that initial understanding has stuck around and it has lingered well into the 21st century. And unfortunately, because of that, doctors really don't have a proper understanding of what's going on, and neither do people within like the sport world, whether that is the sport authorities themselves, right, defining what drugs are banned versus what drugs aren't banned within something like drug-tested sport or drug-tested bodybuilding federations, as well as what drugs have side effects that are really negative for individuals. I know in US and in Canada, we've had so many blasting almost like propaganda-based things against anabolic androgenic steroids since the 80s, that they are these very demonized and scary drugs that are going to cause all these crazy things to happen. We fail to see something like an oral contraceptive doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons why I got into this field, was because that just did not make sense to me. When we strip it away, when we strip away all of the social concepts, when we strip away the language, when I just look at molecules and what they're doing inside the body, I can get a clear picture. And that's what I've done with my research. And that has led me to some really, really interesting areas, such as trying to understand why androgens in women have these certain ideas around them, and how can I actually change the way that our bodies work with them? How can I minimize certain negative effects, whether it's an exogenous androgen, like an anabolic steroid, or somebody that has hyperandrogenism. That's just them. That's the way that their bodies created them. How can I work with somebody that's got, say, high estrogen, whether that's as a result of being on birth control, whether that's as a result of being on an androgen, or whether that's just them? How can I manipulate that in order to try to create an environment that is going to be healthier for that individual over the long term? When we take how we look out of the picture, it also helps us make better sense of this. One of the things that I've seen a lot within PEDs lately is that people do the polypharmacy approach. And so they start off with, say, Anavar or oxandrolone is the actual name of it. Then they also are started to add in something like clenbuterol to burn fat. They're starting to add in something like thyroid hormone. And they'll try to do this to be able to elicit a lean, muscular physique. If you take away that thing of like trying to elicit a lean, muscular physique and ask yourself, what are those drugs actually doing within the body? It doesn't take a researcher to see that it's fucking stuff up. That they are working so many processes at the same time. And then let's add in something like exercise. Let's add in something like nutritional habits. Let's add in something like social and emotional behaviors. And we literally are scrambling our bodies up, and for what? The way that we look. When your body functions optimally internally, the outside is going to look the way that you want it to. We can try to manipulate that through the use of drugs, and it might work once or twice, or even maybe for some individuals 3 or 4 times. But over time, those tactics aren't going to work anymore, because you've literally tried to fight something that is not the way that your body functions. For women, say you're taking an androgen, you're inducing a hyperandrogenic state. So you're inducing those things that we associate with something like polycystic ovarian syndrome. female anabolic users also induce things that we associate with a birth control user, like inducing infertility or changing their ovulatory cycles. If somebody is still having an ovulatory cycle where they're on an androgen, I mean, that's a really interesting area I would love to be able to dive more in once I'm done my doctorate, because we don't know women that can still ovulate while they're on an androgen. There is not enough research and literature on that.
How would you pass that through the ethics board?
Well, yeah. So then that's the thing, is that the research often on female androgen use is related to like menopause and HRT. And so that research, we're not looking at ovulation, right? We're looking at trying to help the women transition through this like last reproductive phase, even though they should, in my opinion. When we're also looking at androgenic research, it's within these very clinical populations that they're looking at other things. They're looking at bone density. They're looking at muscle wasting. They're not looking at ovulation and ovulatory disturbances. And so when women have that, I don't want you to think that it means that you're in the clear, because we don't know what that means. It could be that you're not taking what you think you're taking. It could be that you might have it once, but you might not have it the next time you take it. So I think to just realize and to remember that we don't know what's going on here, hopefully is enough of a reminder for people when they're dabbling with androgen use. Like I have sitting like right in front of me, actually, I have, this is unpublished research at the moment, but it is a lovely critical review of women and steroid use in sport and physical culture. And I did this back, it took me a couple of years to do it, but I just tried to find as much literature as I could on the use of steroids, period, whether this is birth control or anabolics within the athletic female population, in order to get a better idea of where did we get these ideas from? How did we come up with these ideas that, you know, females are going to turn into these super freak athletes if they take an anabolic? And that really the conclusions around a lot of the stuff is that those were based off of stereotypes and misconceptions. They weren't based off of medical research. They weren't based off clinical research. They were based off those ideas that androgens are the male hormone and estrogens are the female hormone. And because women historically were not perceived to be athletic or have muscles or be lean, it meant that the opposite of that was that by taking a hormone that was the male quote hormone, they would gain those things. And that's just not the case. If a female already has high androgens and they take more androgens, they're not going to get leaner. They're just going to fuck themselves up. They're going to be inducing things like hair growth, insulin resistant weight gain, inflammation, neurotransmitter disturbances, obesity, dyslipidemia, cholesterol issues, virilization and hair growth, cystic acne. And these aren't things that are just going to stop when you go off, because you've kicked your body into a cycle. And this is the same thing with birth control or hormonal contraceptives, is that your body is very, very smart. It is so much smarter than us. We have no clue on the outside. What it's doing on the inside is so smart. And it will often, if we put something into the mix, our body will first try to help it, to control for it. So if a female is taking a drug that's going to, say, influence their ovarian hormone production, their androgens or their adrenals, will go like, hey, I have to balance myself out now. So with birth control, it often will blunt our ovaries' ability to create androgens. So our adrenal glands will go like, cool, I got to bump up my production because my ovaries aren't making it anymore. So I now need to go into overdrive. And then fat cells will be like, cool, I now need to store these because I don't know how long I'm going to be able to keep up this overproduction for. Yeah. And there are other systems within our body that also try to take up and pick up that slack. And that causes over time, or even in short-term use, for some individuals, a really, really difficult physiological scenario to be able to manipulate, mitigate risk, to manage, or to do something like get pregnant, have fertility hope within their future. Because the prolonged use, what they're taking, their body's own environment, the other variables and other factors are all going to wage into this and change how the individual is able to sustain use of something without, like, quote, like negative effects.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say the part about the adrenals and them taking over, because like you see again a common trend of people that have kind of done that, and they seem to get sick all the time, like chronic flus and colds and weight gain, and it's just that cycle constantly over and over again. And I always think when somebody's sick constantly, it's like, well, what is that trying to tell you? Like, what is going on and what are the problems there? So it's really interesting. Like, I've never really thought about it in that regard, coming back to not just PED use, but hormonal. I've always thought of it more as, yes, stress and overtraining and those sort of things, but really coming back to that. So I think that's really important for people listening. Like, if you're that person that's always sick, always tired, always, you know, up and down with your moods, like, let's think a little deeper than, you know, I'm just having a bad day, or I'm just, it's flu season. You know what I mean? I'm going to go get the flu shot. That's like the one at the moment. I'm like,
absolutely. And like the immune system, we're still trying to understand the extent of that relationship with our body, with our hormones, pardon me. But we know that there is a really, really important relationship between the immune system and our endocrine system. And that we know that when there are signs of imbalanced hormones, there is also an immune response that's going to come from that. The same thing is with gastric and gut issues. We know that gut issues and the ways that we even break down our food is influenced by our hormones and our hormone dysregulation. And whether you're taking a hormonal contraceptive or an anabolic steroid, you are inducing hormonal imbalance. You are taking a drug that is not on a replacement dose or for a replacement reason. So therefore you are inducing some degree of hormonal imbalance. And the effects of that, let's say, for example, the gallbladder. The gallbladder is vital for how our bodies are able to break down nutrients. So if we're not having proper hormone production, we're affecting our gallbladder. If we're affecting our gallbladder, we're affecting how we're breaking down fats in particular. And then when individuals tell me that they've got a hormonal issue and they're going to go on keto and they're not going to do any of the other types of things that they need to do to get their body healthy, honestly, it scares the shit out of me, because I know now that you're going to get even sicker, even fatter, less energy, all these things that are the opposite of what keto people promise is going to happen, because they have not put the proper foundations in place to be able to create an overall healthier system, because they don't realize the effects that hormones have on something like our gallbladder, our liver. Liver is vital. Like liver, I can't stress the importance of the liver. The liver is absolutely vital to our health and to our body. And is absolutely vital to the ways that we break down hormones. We are still understanding all this effects, because we still don't really, like the research on this is still fairly new. When you think about it, we've only known what hormones are since 1908. That's not that long. Birth control was only developed, combined oral contraceptives were developed in about 1960, and 57 to 61 they were released. Synthetic estrogen was produced in early 1930s. Synthetic androgens were 1937. There are still people alive that have lived in a world where there has not been synthetic hormones. So these are new. This is all new and all we're still learning. But when we know with something like the liver, that the role of something like estrogen and the liver is vital. So if somebody is taking an anti-estrogen for fat loss purposes, that not only is going to have an effect on so many systems of the body. I could go on to that one for a day and a half, but just the liver itself is that metabolitic and inflammatory disorders have been associated with something like estrogen deficiency. They have been associated with a liver that does not function properly. They have been associated, and these two things researchers have started to look at, and that's to try to figure out what's the relevant role that liver hormone production, metabolism, and storage has on the overall reproductive function of an individual. And how does that influence something like what my work has looked at is virilization. So if somebody has a really messed up liver, how is that going to influence whether they're on the pill or off the pill or on an androgen or off the androgen? How is that going to affect how their body is able to just keep their androgen levels at a homeostasis, so they don't have something like cystic acne, or they don't have something like secondary hair loss, or visceral weight gain. And so I think all too often people think about just taking Accutane or Rogaine for their, the visual stuff. You realize that that's happening on the inside. You got to fix the inside. Those things are only like birth control and reproductive disorders. It's only a Band-Aid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're pushing it all through the liver as well. Any oral contraceptive and especially anabolic steroids. I mean, a lot of the stereotypically female PEDs are oral. So, I mean, thinking Anavar, even Stanozol, it's very hepatotoxic. So your liver is taking a double beating there.
Yeah, so, exactly. That's the same idea with those nutrient deficiencies. It's a double thing that's happening. And like we know, for example, recently, the term, I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, it is like this, it drives me bonkers. Like, I cannot stand this term because people are being diagnosed with it that have hormonal imbalances. So polycystic ovarian syndrome or hyperandrogenism, they've linked this non-fatty liver disease to this. And it's essentially because your liver is getting overworked. It is having to try to break down hormones without having the proper tools to break down hormones. And now if you're having an excess hormone production, it's having to work double overtime without having the tools to actually break them down. So of course it's going to get some insufficiencies and some damages. And that just makes physiological sense. However, instead of looking at it from the source, we've created yet another diagnosis to give people and another pharmaceutical treatment or another scare tactic, which really does not actually help people. It doesn't help create a healthier body. I know, and I told her I was going to talk to her about this, but I'll talk about this on my next podcast with my older sister, who has polycystic. Like, she went to her doc, and I mean, after my mom passed away, we were all under tons of stress, and she went to her doctor to get her labs done, and her doctor thought that she was like, "Oh my God, your liver is awful. Like, I think you have hepatitis." So my sister called, like, "Oh my God, like, what am I?" I'm like, "Sarah, chill. Like, your hormones are messed up because you've just gone through this super stressful event and you already have messed up hormones to begin with. So right now your liver is just decimated. Like, we need to fix your liver and everything else is going to come around." Cholesterol issues are hyper issues where somebody has their imbalanced cholesterol. If you're taking a steroid, you're taking a cholesterol molecule. So you're going to mess up your cholesterol. That's just what's going to happen. Is that okay? Well, no, because it's going to have effects on your body and on how you create hormones. So we have to try to fix it at that level instead of just giving somebody a statin and sending them on their way.
Yeah, I mean, throw in the statin as well. I'm assuming that's going to have to be metabolized by the poor liver again. So we're very lucky how resilient our livers are, to be honest. I think it's kind of the thing that's keeping most of us alive.
It is, and it's so, like, I can remember my...
What's going on there?
The store recording?
Hello.
Just give it a sec.
Yeah.
No longer is doing what it needs to do. If we're having tons of hormonal imbalances or you know, chemical toxin levels, our liver is not doing what it needs to do. And our liver doesn't just metabolize things. It's responsible, and it influences a whole host of things. And so it really is like this orchestra, this spider web of so many different things happening. And we can't just pinpoint and pick out things without looking at the big picture. I mean, clinically, that's one of the things that I get to do. But I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have the bigger picture background on it as well. Because especially say with something like, I mean, a great example is androgen use in individuals. So people take an androgen and they perceive that they have to take an anti-estrogen because they're aromatizing at a fast level. Well, not everybody is going to have that same capacity, and not everybody is going to have that same affinity for, say, high levels of estrogen. And not to mention, if you completely nuke your estrogen with the use of, say, aromatin or letrozole or something like that, what is that going to have on the rest of your body? Because you don't know
how
much
rebound effect.
Exactly. Not only that is, I mean, we talked about at the very beginning with my bone density.
Yeah.
You're lining yourself up for a very, very scary future.
Yeah.
And fat loss, insulin resistance, mood disturbances, gastric issues. So if you're knocking out that estrogen, that's really, really scary for women that are taking, say, a hormonal contraceptive. You're giving yourself a synthetic estrogen. So your body's ability to make estrogen on its own is now going to be altered. Now, if you're a female taking an androgen simultaneous to an oral contraceptive, like there, if we want to talk about the little research, the only research I have on this came from East Germany in the 1960s and 70s. And that's when they were doing state-sponsored doping. And I had to fight to get any research on this. And it's not looking at health markers, it's looking at performance markers on how to pass drug tests. So I can hypothesize, and I have many times, to try to figure out and to help people that come to me. But it really is such a great, like, it's just, I mean, it's like black or dark matter. We really don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, which is kind of scary. So we have got, what do you got? One last question, because we don't want to keep you.
I think the last one would just be, so would you use that staircase effect, almost treating someone who's come off the pills, very similar to someone who's coming off of androgenic anabolic steroids? You know, you're looking more at, let's get you off of that and then fix things like one piece of the puzzle at a time: lifestyle, sleep, gut health, all of that.
So I'd go back one step to that. So what I always try to think about and do is, when you try to develop an action plan, and now this can be for whether somebody is on something already, wanting to come off something, or wanting to go on something. So different scenarios. Do you have the foundations in place for a healthy body, regardless of what you're taking, want to stop taking, or want to start taking? So if it's like it's a house. So do you have those foundations of your house built? And those can be things like, what is your sleep schedule? Where's your stress levels? What's your exercise? How's your inflammation? Coping strategies? What other meds? Are we managing the effects of other meds that you're taking? What's your gut health? What's your liver function? Put in place all the different things that create a healthy body first. Because if it's like, have you guys heard of the game Jenga before, where you like stack blocks, and your tower is already like about to fall over, and you're taking out one of those blocks that are close to the bottom, you're going to crumble. So even if it means that you might be on, say, birth control for a little bit longer, at least you're going to build the foundations in terms of, say, chemical deficiencies or gut health to help it. So when you come off, you're building and you've already got that stable environment in place. And so this, and if you want to even simplify it even more, think about all the different stressors on the body, internal and external, and work with those, manage those to the best of your abilities. Because now when you come off something, you can also start to not only have more of like a tailored plan to help with the effects of that drug, but you know that it's not going to have this like ricochet effect like it would if you didn't already have those factors in place. So I typically speaking will suggest that, because going like my staircase effect, you have to have your foundation restored. Then you can manipulate it. And then in the future for performance athletes, we can enhance it and make it power at a little bit stronger of a process, depending on who that person is and what their goals are. But that doesn't mean that we can do that enhancement if our foundation's not there. If our foundations aren't there, we got nothing. Now, some people will go off something and then say, come to me, and they'll be like, okay, so I'm off birth control now, what do I do? And I go like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen because I don't know what my variables are that aren't in place right now. So let's work. You're going to have to invest time and resources and money into this to be able to get through this as healthy as we can in a fairly short period of time. We're going to have to really, just jam pack your liver to make sure it is just working very effectively. We're going to have to rule out all these nutrient deficiencies. We're going to have to do all these things. So it might take a little bit more of an upfront thing, but we'll get you there. There is no time frame for this. I have women that will come off and get an ovulatory period within 3 months. I will have women that will be a year, 2 years, or even more. Now, going in, rushing, and getting blood work right away is going to tell you next to nothing, because your body is a very unstable environment. You need to stabilize it. By stabilizing it, it gives you a place to go from and to build from, just like a house. If your cracked foundation is there, you're not going to put granite countertops in your house. You're not just going to rush in and expect to get fat loss if you've just gone off the pill. you have to have those foundations in place first. And so once those are, this is this ongoing process. You're never going to stop trying to have your foundations in place, whether you are 21 years old and have just competed, whether you're 26 years old and wanting to come off birth control, whether you're 35 and are trying to do, come off, let's say, an anabolic cycle safely. These foundational elements always have to be there. You have to have them there before you can really start to manipulate, because your base is not there. You can't manipulate something that's not in place, at least safely, and therefore you cannot enhance something if the base is not in place safely. And this is an ongoing process. So if we think about that staircase and we just turn it into a cycle, and this is an ongoing process that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. And this is what it means to create and manage a healthy body, no matter if you're taking drugs or not, no matter if you've had any predisposing illnesses or not. Health is an ongoing management project. It is not a light switch. We can't just turn it on and off.
Which is why people need to invest in it, and why I value coaching over everything else. And, it's scary really when you think about it, when you put it in that term of make sure that base is there before you consider even anabolics or that sort of performance enhancing use. But when the real reason is most people use it because something's probably missing, and they're using it to band-aid something when, like the opposite reason as to why they probably could use it down the line if, say, everything was aligned and they were a professional, let's say, bodybuilder like a Phil Heath, and obviously, let's be real, who appears on stuff. So, he's probably done a lot of testing, and you would hope, but it's also scary what even some of the pro bodybuilders talk about when they talk about drug use. And then you've got 18-year-old boys looking up to them as their role models, and some of the stuff they're saying, as we all know, is total bullshit. So it's scary, but sorry, you go.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, it really is just this ongoing management, because before you, like, if we think about this as like before, during, and after, there are different things that an individual needs to do. They need to identify and plan out. They need to see what's happening within their body and how to work with it. They need to monitor it. So what are the different methods that you're going to do to monitor your body? Are you going to track your menstrual cycle? Are you even a male? Like, I tell men to get a date book and to track their health markers just like I do women. Track your exhaustion, track your fatigue, track your energy, track your pump, track all these things. Get some baseline data, because just like women have hormonal changes and variations, men do too. And respond to it in a educated and constructive way. Don't just throw shit at a wall. Don't just take this gauntlet of say, supplements because you perceive it's what you need. You have to understand it first. And then you also have to consider, how am I going to restore my body? It's foundational. Once I come off something, how am I going to restore it if I've been doing something for a long time? Like if I'm an individual and say I'm on a med for blood pressure, I can't just go off that and hope my blood pressure is going to come back. I have to not only manage the effects of that drug, I also have to manage the issues that I had blood pressure problems in the first place. And then I need to have an action plan in place so I can accurately evaluate how I'm responding to something. I mean, with women, when they go off the pill, it's that they go like, well, it's month 3 and I still don't have my period. Well, what's wrong with me? And it's because they haven't created an evaluative plan before they start this process. Women that are on androgens, tracking your hair growth. I mean, all too often women will say to me, like, I just woke up one day and I had hair everywhere. I'm like, I'm sorry, it does not happen that way. This is a slow progressive thing that all of a sudden you then realize because you opened your eyes to it. So you can track your hair growth over time, whether this is through pictures or you use, the Fairman-Galloway scale or whatever it might be. And so for you to be able to also create that date of like, okay, I am going to check back in. So I'm not going to dwell on this every single day because that's not healthy, but I'm going to create a date and a plan here. And I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to check in with myself 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, whatever it might be. Create a plan before, because when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to see things with clarity. And I'm speaking from both professional and personal experience that when I'm in the thick of something, I've often like freaked the fuck out before I should have, because I did not create a plan for myself to be able to work with this and to manage this. And we know from like psychological research and social research that this is what people do for stress management, is that they create a plan. So say if they're traveling, they have a plan in place of how they're going to get from the airport to their hotel. They have a plan in place for if they lose their passport, they know what they need to do. we have to do the same with our bodies, because I mean, ignorance isn't bliss. Ignorance is risk. The more we don't know and the more initiative we don't take, the more we're lining ourselves up for health risks and consequences, not only today, but down the road. And that is something that really, really needs to be, drilled into people within our fitness industry. We don't know what certain supplements are going to do to us long term. We don't know the effects of competing for years on end. We don't know what that's going to do to somebody long term. We can hypothesize, but you're different than me. I'm different than you. So it is still going to have a degree of variance among the population.
Absolutely. And I think you just summed it all up very well just then. And I think we're going to probably split this podcast into a two-parter, but yeah. I think the longest one we had so far was probably Lane Norton. I think he was about 2 hours because he's also quite a good friend of us. So there was a lot of rambling in there as well. And but this was really, really good. Brilliant. And I'm just so thankful that we had you on. And I think that the females and the males out there, I think I would love to do a whole nother one on males, like in particular, because you've been working, Sean works with a lot of guys trying to fix them after they've done stuff, stupid shit. So that's kind of
to stop them doing it so irrationally.
But the hard thing,
absolutely.
The hard thing.
Oh, I was going to say, there's something you can learn from men and women.
Yeah, and the hard thing for Sean is that he has always been a natural athlete. So to try to get guys to listen to you when you haven't, quote unquote, done all this shit is really, really hard. So I think it's, it's like you giving males advice. They probably don't listen sometimes as well as some bro in the gym because we don't get it, So I think bringing awareness to listen to educated people more than the bros in the gym and listen to people that care more health first and performance second. And I think that's really the big take home. Have you got one last piece of overreaching, mind-blowing advice for the ladies out there? Put you on the spot.
I think for men, women, one of the biggest things I've learned from my career, my research, and my own personal experience is that our bodies are incredibly smart, but they are also incredibly resilient to a point. We're not invincible. And I think it's really easy when, you're getting good workouts and your physique looks the way you want it to think that your body is invincible. But the reality of the situation is that our bodies might be resilient, but they're not invincible. We can't do these things long term. And ultimately, we don't know the effects. We don't know long-term effects. And it still is going to be, even if we do or have a better idea, it's still going to be different for every single individual out there. My glimmer of hope in all of my work and all of my own experience was that if I created a better relationship with my body, it helped me weather the storm a lot easier. As somebody that used to have a horrendous eating disorder, I used to feel very disconnected, and that was only worse when I first started getting sick and feeling like I had no control over my body. So I found it really has helped myself to have a better relationship with my body, no matter the way that I look. Because the way that I look, it's not a constant variable. It changes every single day throughout the day. And that once I found acceptance of that, it made my own process a lot easier. And that's one thing I do try to really help individuals who I work with, is that our mindfulness, our ability to navigate stress, our perspectives we have about our bodies and the whole process, if we can gain a very healthy relationship there, I can assure you that the rest of the process is going to be so much more satisfying, but also just so much easier and more productive on so many different levels. If we constantly, question why am I not the weight that I want to be? Why I hate my body. This is so stupid. I can't get pregnant, or I can't gain muscle, or I can't lose fat. That self-talk
toxic
is so toxic. And it's not me saying this I'm woo-woo, whatever people think is it's just spiritual mumbo jumbo. No, we see the effects on our neurotransmitters. We see the effects on our hormones. We see these effects. And so creating a more sustainable relationship with our bodies and with our own health journeys truly will make such a profound difference in somebody's pursuit. And I can absolutely empathize and sympathize with somebody who's in the thick of it, that it is hard to create that. But every single day, if you try just a little bit of something you're thankful for the way that you look, it will dramatically shift your perspective of your body, which in turn will dramatically shift how your body is functioning.
Absolutely.
I love that.
That resonates a lot with you and your, because you always talk about gratitude.
Yeah, gratitude and perspective and, you know, just rationalizing. Women, we're so bloody irrational. We're like, oh my God, this has happened. And it's crazy how much the effect, like even anecdotally I see with clients when we improve their mindset and we improve all of those things. And again, I talk about my clients, that's your base. Like if your mindset's fucked, like say goodbye to like your nutrition and training results. Like don't try to blanket it with your body first. Like it's just not a good path to go down. So yeah. Absolutely. It's one of those things. So thank you so much. I feel like I feel like you're my soul sister, all these things that you're talking about. And I feel like it's so nice to connect with more women that have not only been through it, but have come out of it on the other side where they're now helping people and becoming more educated. And, you know, you're a true inspiration to many, many women. And since I found you one day on Instagram, I was like, why didn't I not find her earlier? Like, I was like going and watching every video, every podcast, and I was like, Sean, listen to this. So
yeah, surprising how many guys as well.
Yeah, we've sent a few guys.
Yeah, got Victoria Felkar on our podcast, and like, I follow her.
And Sean also follows your boyfriend, so he was like, but yeah, no, it's been amazing.
Thank you guys. That means so much to me.
That's okay, and we appreciate it. It's a lot of time out of your day. You're a busy woman, and you know we've been like going almost 2.5 hours. It's almost bedtime for us now. So yeah, we really appreciate it, and thank you so much for getting on. Let's just do last one. If people want to get in contact with you or anything that you're doing at the moment, give us a bit of a plug, bit of a spiel there.
Yeah. This is where the truth comes out. So I've taken a hiatus. So people that follow me will know my mom passed away in March, and I was her primary caretaker. So my life personally completely shifted about last June, so about a year ago now. More actually than like 18 months. So I did take, for my own health and sanity, I did take a step back from things like social media just to focus on living for a little bit. And to help myself heal and grief. I mean, that's a totally another topic on its own. Maybe another time we could talk about that effect on health. So I have not been as active on social media. That doesn't mean that I don't have a plan in place, though, to get myself back to it. I actually do. And it is starting with talking to you guys. This is a big goal for me to get myself back into more of my professional work. At the same time, I'm still working on my PhD, so that is a shit show on its own. But they can follow me on social media. So I have Instagram and Facebook, and they're both just Victoria Felkar. And my website is the same thing. It's just victoriafelkar.com. And there is a lot of resources on that already. But I am still slowly getting all that stuff put up because there is a crap ton of stuff on my computer that just needs to be uploaded. And then my email is on both my social media as well as on my website. And it's just victoria@victoriafelkar.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And her website's great base to start. There's just some awesome videos and all the links to all the podcasts you've ever been on, which is awesome. That's what I found really, really helpful. I didn't have to go like search your name on iTunes. It was all on the website. And we'll have this podcast on our website, on iTunes, on YouTube, on everything there. And yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If anything resonated with you ladies, please do not hesitate to start at least journaling, tracking now. Be aware. That's probably the biggest thing we want to take from this whole podcast is just awareness for your bodies, because I know I probably spent 20 years ignoring everything, and it's now that, you know, I'm 30 and I'm trying to tell my 20-year-old clients, like, be aware of it now so you don't run into the same shit that we have. So thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate your time, and yeah, that's it.
I think another thing here is guys who are listening to this need to realize what you women go through.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful.
He's very good.
I say it every day.
Yeah.
Thank you for being female.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop that.
Thank you guys.